So Council of Geeks did this really interesting video like a week or two ago talking about the efficacy of recasting older Doctors, because this is something that Big Finish have been doing for a while. We talked about it last week on stream. The Annihilators, the Third Doctor adventure, where the only surviving cast member to reprise their role in that story was Fraser Hines as Jamie McCrimmon, and an older version of Jamie McCrimmon to tie in with the upcoming Second Doctor box set that is coming out in the later on in the year, and also to next. We've got Michael Troughton, who is playing the Second Doctor. We've got Daisy Ashford, who is playing Liz Shaw. John Coleshaw is the Brigadier, of course. We even have David Bradley, Stephen Noonan, who are playing the First Doctor as well. Basically, Big Finish has been like a really cool home for impressionists for the past couple of years. And this is a discussion that I think people have been interested in having outside of the confines of the audio adventures. There's been a lot of talk about whether or not they should be more precedent set, because of course, like, we had the big example in recent years of David Bradley taking over from the First Doctor for Twice Upon a Time. However, that's a bit more of an interesting case because William Hartnell in An Adventure of Space and Time, it was so it kind of felt like the door had already been sort of like creaked open a little bit for it, and it was maybe because of that it was maybe a bit more accepting for the audience to go along with the recast. But also in the Five Doctors in 1983, William Hartnell had passed away by that point, so they got actor Richard Herndl to play the First Doctor in that. So you only had 3 surviving Doctors in that. Craig Potter says, how else would you do classic full cast audio dramas with dead actors? But that's the thing, though. Do you do those stories even though, like, do you leave the legacies of those actors and those characters just there? Because what you're dealing with audio dramas is something that is a uniquely different beast. It's like a weird middle ground between comic books and, you know, actual books, actual novels, and the TV show proper, the visual medium. And the visual medium, the TV show, is where the kind of the true canon, quote-unquote canon, the nooks and the crannies, and kind of do its own thing, and fans are able to embrace it or not embrace it at their own leisure. But for Big Finish, for audio dramas, what gave them their stamp of legitimacy, as opposed to comics, as opposed to novels and such, when they first started out in the late 90s and the early 2000s, was that they had the official stamp of approval from, of course, the BBC as the license to do the audio dramas, but they got the actors on board as well. Their first Doctor Who story in the monthly range was a multi-Doctor story. It starred Peter Davison, Colin Baker, Sylvester McCoy, and then, like a year or 2 years later, Paul McGann joined the roster. He stayed away from Big Finish. He was asked back in 1999, and he politely declined, according to the recollections of Nicholas Briggs. There's some interviews from the late 90s, early 2000s, from the founding of Big Finish, and joined Big Finish until 2012. So what did they do beforehand for the Fourth Doctor? You've got Lalla Ward, Swan Braun for like Companion Chronicles. They got narrators, basically, because these are essentially audiobooks. These aren't full cast audio dramas. So, you know, it's that weird in-between space from full cast audio dramas and audiobooks and such. Earlier, as far as I can tell, just according to the Big Finish website, I can take another quick look to double check that. Okay, 2011, sorry. It was 2011, but either way, it was over a decade into Big Finish doing licensed abound all over the place. And of course, there's also the weird grey area of what if Big Finish want to do stories for actors. Dudman has worked as the 9th Doctor, the 10th Doctor, the 11th Doctor, and the 12th Doctor. Dude's got range. Jacob Dudman is currently the Big Finish incumbent 11th and 12th. Want to do Big Finish? We need to talk about whether or not this attitude of recasting of impressionists should go over to the TV show proper. Because, like I said, it has happened before with David Bradley and Richard Herndl. And I'm in two minds about it. I completely agree with Council of Geeks, where you are essentially a placeholder for a prior actor. You are stepping into those shoes. You are stepping into, like, if you were to get, for example, Sean Pertwee, who is John Pertwee's son, who has quite firmly said no, it would feel Sean Pertwee were to do that. He's not Sean Pertwee as the Third Doctor. He would be Sean Pertwee embodying John Pertwee as the Third Doctor. I think that's a bit weird, and it might take the audience out of it. As Craig Potter says in the chat, they're not impressionists. I'm sure they can do impressions, but they wouldn't be able to do their own thing. It wouldn't be their stamp on the show. They would be walking in the slipstream of a family member. I think the family. For Big Finish, I think that's lovely. To keep it in the family, it gives almost like the okay. It gives it the respectability. I think that's nice. That's a really, like, you know, I don't believe that Nicholas Courtney has got children who are acting in the industry. So do you just bring them on just because they're family and deny John Culshaw, who's not only a gifted impressionist, but also a really great actor? Like, genuinely terrific. Honestly, when it comes to the audio dramas, I'm 100% okay. I think if you can, someone like John Culshaw is terrific. But for the TV show proper, I was umming and ahhing about this after watching of, like, maybe they could do it for specials. Maybe they could do it for the one-off appearance. Like, maybe you can have Sean Pertwee appear as like a random cameo. Like, the Doctor is like going back on their own time stream, and then all of a sudden they wake up, oh, they're in the 1970s or maybe the 80s, and it's Unit, and they turn around and there's a cloaked figure with a cape and everything, with a red cape at a blackboard, and like, oh, that would be pretty cool as like a one-off cameo thing. However, firstly, you might rip audience members out of the story because, oh, it's a cameo from an actor who's not really the Doctor. You kind of would need to establish that casting decision first, in like their own proper story. Otherwise, some audience members will just see it's not a 100% perfect approval. There's been talk in recent years, and it's mainly Disney which have been spearheading the conversation about this, with a younger, de-aged Mark Hamill, but with a different voice. It's not Mark Hamill voicing Luke Skywalker in The Mandalorian. Spoilers for The Mandalorian. Bit late. It's like an artificial intelligence, like a voice machine. That is, you won't ask for royalties and stuff. It's just a machine. That's the main issue. Even the first digitally recreated actor. There have been numerous ones before. A lot of it taking place in, which felt a little bit disrespectful because Audrey Hepburn had an eating disorder, so like a chocolate commercial seems a bit like poor taste. And also there was like a Bruce Lee. It was for like a vodka, like a spirit, a drink, but Bruce Lee was like staunchly like, he wouldn't touch alcohol, like, at all. That felt super disrespectful, doesn't it? Scott Jarrett says James Dean is going to star in a film. But Disney are trying to make the conversation happen, and they're doing it for Disney+. They're a multi it. They have the money to do it. They're the ones who are going to be pioneering the technology. This is not going to be something in the BBC's hands for a very long time. But when it comes to the actual recasting of Doctors on screen, I agree with Council of Geeks. I think that you should let the legacy of the actor be their legacy. If Colin Baker, for example, wanted to come back for a cameo or an appearance or something, that's his right, of course. I'd love to see that, and it's, of course, got to do with the creative. If and when Colin Baker leaves us, as morbid a thought as it is, do you bring in a deepfake? Do you bring in an impressionist? And I would honestly err on the side of no. I'd err on the for expanded media, for Big Finish, do as you please. Because that is for the niche within the niche. That is for the dedicated audience who want more of those stories. But when or a year after they've passed away, 100% and Star Wars films. Like Michael Douglas in Ant-Man. Like the aging up of Hayley Atwell in Captain America: The Winter Soldier, and the de-aging of Robert Downey Jr. in Civil War. There's so much there. The precedent is there. The technology is getting better all the time. I don't think that will be in the BBC's hands. That fill the boots to walk in the shadow of the slip in the show. That might be where the line has to be drawn. And as disappointing as it would be that Colin Baker on screen. Not saying that they did it with bad intentions or anything, but if you want to future-proof that legacy, do the best that you can now. And then let expanded media run amok. Because I think the fans will understand. The fans will be happy to have those stuff. Nicholas Courtney and John Pertwee and Caroline John. And when Sadie Miller's there as well, the main point of Big Finish, isn't it? It's sort of being able to have these stories in that suspension of disbelief realm. That you do a lot of the heavy lifting already in your head. For TV, answer here. I don't think there's a right answer here either. Apart from, of course, don't do it immediately after an actor has passed away, and do it with the permission of the estate and of the families. You don't want to have, like, Sylvester McCoy morally, for the audience, going to be crossed over the next few decades. Some legacies are disrespected before a company, whether it's the BBC or Disney or Warner Brothers or whatever, takes that too far. Is above my pay grade. Let's have a look. There was plans in the 90s to make a... probably can't see properly. But yeah, this is clearly like Tom Baker inspired. And I don't believe there was any intention to use Tom Baker to voice them. There's K9 there, of course, as well. The line between the actor, especially for Tom Baker, where he basically was the Doctor, that's... The lines are fuzzy. Like, Jodie Whittaker had a lot of input in her costume. David Tennant had a lot of input in his costume. I believe Capaldi might have had some as well in his costume. There's a lot of Hartnell in the past, but it felt like for that episode, Stephen Moffat had just seen that clip from Dalek Invasion of Earth with the jolly good. So, of course, we're talking about this conversation about the efficacy of like recasting and doubles and impressionists. Doesn't happen. That's like worst scenario where you then you know you're done messed up.